I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we meet upon this evening, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and any Indigenous peoples here this evening. We support the Uluru Statement of the Heart and acknowledge that our Indigenous peoples were this land's first storytellers, passing down stories to their families and communities. We are grateful to continue this ritual of storytelling here with our community this evening.
Dedication. You sit with me at your dining tables, remembering. Your words invoke a space between past and present, when your bodies were younger, more flexible, and your dreams not fully formed. I ask, you answer, but soon you listen to one another, your memory calling forth hers, his story elaborating yours. Sometimes you interrupt, complete the other's thought. We move back in time, 20, 30, 50 years, back to other cities, other homes, to a moment, an echo of collision. This moment, no other. The moment when you meet. You laugh as you set time, place, location, and words burst from the selves you inhabited then. The moment when you lean in, when you fall from the balcony, when you feel exhilarated by the promise of what might follow. At the time, you may be single, divorced, or just out of school. You present at that conference, agree to that party, the dinner you don't really want to attend. You run from shelter from the rain, and he kisses you suddenly. In that space of desire and uncertainty, unsure of who you might become or how your histories might mesh, you touch some swirling force, a gravitational field, and an energy pulls you towards one another. Is it confusing, thrilling, accidental? You are headed somewhere else but are stopped by this moment, and life will never be the same. It is with gratitude that I tell your stories. The beginning. It's 1999. I am a single mother, committed academic, an emerging poet, yearning for love and never finding it. Finally, I've given up on love. Long after the betrayals and crushing disappointment of a 14-year marriage, long after a string of never quite right flirtations following divorce. So I am taken aback when Greg appears, as if dropped from the heavens into our mutual friend's home on a Saturday night. I notice him right away. At the fireplace, telling stories at ease within himself, his face open and warm. We're introduced, chat, retreat to other conversations and back, but there's a spark, a possibility, that pressure in the chest, at once urgent and afraid. At subsequent dinners and lunches, Greg and I are astonished to discover so much likeness. Both the eldest of three, we grow up on opposite sides of the world with similar despotic dads, long-suffering, protective mothers. You know your father has his ways. And a strangling set of expectations as firstborn. We both marry the wrong one, run away to desert climes, and live with years of parental silence and devastating disapproval. Later, we send our only sons to the same school in Melbourne, yet never once sight each other in parking lots or at parent-teacher nights until now. Age 52 and 54, long after our boys have flown, our moment, we meet. In time, we take the day off to celebrate 1 year together, enjoy a lavish lunch at a Yarra Valley winery, but I'm anxious. Soon we'll travel to New Jersey, where Greg will be paraded before my family as the finally you found him guy. I worried how to warn him and not scare him away. You know, I say, My dad's first question will be, when do you plan to marry? Really? Greg says, flabbergasted. Are you sure? Seemingly unaware that all our friends have already asked me the same question. Well, he says in his deadpan way, what's the answer? There's a pause, a heartbeat. Me. I think the answer is yes. And him. I think yes. Definitely yes. No rose petals or bended knee. No sky-written message or ring hidden in the souffle. Just yes. Probably the least romantic proposal ever, but we are old enough and scarred enough to know what we found. Still, I find it miraculous, this confluence of timing or serendipity that brings us together and keeps us together over the following 2 decades until now. In all the years before or since, I never imagined such ease or compatibility to be possible. Herein lies the kernel of this collection, love regardless, a desire to celebrate love that surprises and endures over time.
In an extraordinary moment of timing or destiny, Miriam and Matthew meet in New York, winter of 1978, while she's studying for her master's degree. Matthew is 25, Miriam 24. 16 months later, they marry in an intimate ceremony with Miriam's small Melbourne family present. They love their life in New York. Miriam finds challenging work in publishing, Matthew builds a thriving pharmacy business, and their 3 daughters are born. But after 17 years, the pull of Australia is strong, especially for Miriam, and they return to Melbourne in 1993, facing the challenges of reconnection with a spirited unity. Their pleasure in each other's company is strong. Lots of eye contact. And knowing smiles as their story unfolds. They sit close, often continuing each other's sentences as they tell of crossing culture, nation and distances that never become an obstacle to their love.
January 10th, 1978. We meet on my parents' anniversary. It is remarkable to connect on the same date they marry. I arrive in New York only 10 days earlier to begin studies in aesthetics and take some time out to get myself together after a debilitating 2-year marriage.
I enter the lobby of her aunt and uncle's apartment in downtown Brooklyn. A frigid cold night, 2 ferocious German shepherds snarling. As it happens, I meet Miriam's parents. Just the briefest hello, they're travelling in Europe. But stop over to check she's settled in all right.
Shortly after New Year's Eve, I'm invited to dinner by my father's oldest friends from the Lodge Ghetto, the Freemans. They escaped just before the liquidation. Dad's dead keen for me to meet them, but it's utterly freezing. I simply don't want to go. No point. Who are these people anyway?
Emma and Harry reside in the Bronx, at least an hour's ride by subway. I love Emma, not only a great doctor, but a mother to me.
Well, she eyes me over and proclaims, "You must meet my other son, Matthew." I'm completely confused. I know her only son, Abe, is engaged, so who should I meet? I decline politely, but Emma won't be told. We'll introduce you to Matthew. That's that.
Next day, Abe phones. I met a beautiful girl from Melbourne. You must take her out. I'm parochial and seriously need to check the atlas to find where Australia is located. Okay, I'll ask her to lunch. But what does my buddy say? No, she's worth dinner. Wow, now I am intrigued. I call her 10 times, but no answer. Wrong number?
It's 11 at night. 11. I'm just back from the theatre. Golda Meir, play by Anne Bancroft. When the phone rings,
I make inane small talk. My friend Abe gave me your number. How long are you here? How do you like New York? You free this Saturday night? Luckily, you say yes. I call again to listen to your voice. So refreshing, lilting and lyrical, unlike anyone I've ever met.
Actually, you phone every single night that week. Who is this idiot who keeps calling?
I'm a bit rusty. Haven't dated for over a year, what with interning at the pharmacy. Night classes 6 times a week. Not cool to wear my puffy ski coat. I look 15. So, I rock up on a sub-zero night in my John Travolta leather. Edge past the menacing security dogs buzz up. The apartment's tiny sofa draped in plastic. We flee to Chinatown for pancakes.
You throw me that cheesy line.
I say, if I knew you were this good looking, I would have come earlier.
Oh God, this guy. Years later, I write a poem. They begin their narrative in Brooklyn's frigid air. As if taken by surprise, the prurient moon hangs low, exhaling soft red-orange across the bridge to Chinatown. In Cafe 456, above the cacophony of sizzling plates, he proposes moushu pancakes as she watches his delicate fingers deftly roll them like a joint. Licorice-coloured bowls simmer with a whisper of the night. Outside, the moon hovers patiently.
It's such a fantastic evening. We click. I'm hooked.
I know I'm in trouble following our first kiss. That night I can't sleep. I sense he's different from my ex-husband, but what if he's not? It takes time to open up my heart again, to let my guard down.
After 3 months, Miriam leaves Brooklyn to rent a room uptown so we can date more often. But we're poor students. Money's tight. She's on a student visa and isn't allowed to work. On Sundays, I bring her bagels from H&H. Small pleasures. By July, I've totally fallen. She's stylish, beautiful, and so warm. It's easy with us. No pressure. She'll only be in New York for 1 year.
He doesn't want to get serious, but panics when I return to Australia in July.
Will she return? How long will the relationship play itself out? I'm a practical man. New York's my home. My family's here. I'm happy. Such a long month waiting for her. I hired a few of her best sweaters, so she must come back. But at the airport?
Reunited. We know.
Absolutely no. We find an apartment together on the Hudson at Devil's Point. The ugliest dwelling ever, but the view is out of this world. I propose in November, so we can celebrate with your close friends visiting from Melbourne. In retrospect, I should have waited for your parents in December.
Mum's not impressed because you don't ask for my hand in marriage, horrified by the gaping hole in your car floor, our hideous apartment decor. Clearly, she announces, loudly, it takes very little to make you happy.
Oh my God. It's not easy, but I learned to tease her, make her laugh. Your dad is less judgmental. A creative man, a dreamer, but he wants us to marry right away. They're here now, why not? Back then I'm oblivious about distances that separate us. 25 plus hours to fly here. But we're young and selfish. We want to wait until the summer when it's warmer.
A June wedding at your uncle's house in Scarsdale. Intimate. 75 of our dearest come to celebrate with us. My cousins, my mum and dad return. The rabbi's a lovely man I won't ever forget. He says, this union is bashert. Destiny. Your parents survived the Holocaust, put down roots in Melbourne. Their only child ventures to New York. What's the chance you will collide? For life.
Every day I still think unbelievable. After the wedding, we fly to Colorado for our special honeymoon. Truly, I blow it.
It isn't great. The first night in Denver, we stay at a charming hotel, but Matthew insists we have to join old college friends for dinner. Next day, a stunning drive to Vail, but more friends show up. They sleep in our room. Who are these strangers anyway?
I can't bear to rock the boat. When friends want me to party, I can't say no. I feel obligated.
When we arrive home, I finally secure my green card, but it's a trial finding work. My first job, translating obituaries and wedding notices at the Yiddish Daily Forward, lasts 6 weeks. I enrol at the Betty Owens School of Typing, hoping to find a new job, but I barely reach 40 words per minute.
We need to find you an interview outfit at Labels for Less. Stunning pantsuit and navy blue beret. So Diane Keaton. So cheap, but wool. And you're out there pounding the pavement, agency to agency.
Dissolving in high summer heat. Thankfully, a young woman on the Upper East Side takes pity, sees I can't type, but sends me to an appointment anyway. Double day. They worry I'm overqualified, but I beg. Desperate for money, more hurdles to jump, IQ test, third typing test, 2 more interviews, grinding. But when they hire me, I'm ecstatic. Love my boss, love the job. After 3 weeks, I'm told Jackie Kennedy Onassis works on the 43rd floor. She's searching for an editorial assistant. You'd be perfect. I say, oh no, I'm not ambitious. But interviews are arranged nevertheless. I remember walking into her dark office. Cigarette butts, smoke, lights out. We speak only briefly. She seems to like me.
The person most excited is my mother, just beside herself. She's bursting with pride, bragging to all her friends, guess who my daughter-in-law works for?
I stay with Jackie for 2 years as her reader, writing manuscript reports. It's marvellous, but the environment is too competitive for me, too corporate.
Jackie's incredibly kind. When Miriam's unwell, she says, don't worry, I have a doctor for every bone in your body. She mothers her. It's tender. What luck to fall into this job. Very affirming for you.
It rebuilds my sense of purpose. I adore New York and the life we create there for 17 superb years. But I begin to feel torn. Worried my parents are ageing. I'm the only child of Holocaust survivors. Terrified by the thought of letting them grow old alone.
I owe it to Miriam to at least give Australia a chance. For 1 year, we actually come for a look-see. Keep everything we own in the States.
We pack a few suitcases, rent out our home in White Plains, store our furniture.
I take a partner in business so we can go back anytime. Miriam's crystal clear. If I'm not happy there...
We won't stay. I just want 1 year, a gap year. As we fly into Melbourne, I have no idea if we'll settle. In my mind, I think not. But I'm craving real contact for our girls with their grandparents. Time to reunite as a family.
I deeply appreciate that your dad never pressures us. But we're here 5 minutes and the kids want to stay.
They enjoy a different childhood here. Not as strenuous, less pressure, less programming, and they adore their doting grandparents close by.
My folks are lovely people, but not involved in our lives. Not present. In Florida with their new partners.
Here, the love is tangible. Contact they've missed most of their young lives, especially our eldest. She and Dad have their own conversation. Creative, intellectual. We see the influence in her theatre work.
This would not have happened if we remained in New York. But the adjustment is hard. We arrive in our mid-40s with 3 kids, no security. I'm nervous. Miriam's also under enormous stress, middled between the needs of her husband and parents, feeling pulled each way.
I'm aware of how much you sacrifice, moving from a place where you know everyone to being a stranger, re-establishing in a new culture.
An English-speaking culture which looks similar, but certainly is not. It takes time to adapt.
I soon find terrific work tutoring at the university, but feel dislocated. New York is unfettered for me. Free, I can breathe. It's truly the happiest time of my life with the little ones and Matthew. Here it's complicated and more insular. New Yorkers are transient.
You constantly meet new people. No one lives in the place where they were born. But the writing is on the wall. Big American chain pharmacies are expanding like wildfire. We probably need to sell while we can. Find an opportunity here.
After 5 months, Matthew decides to buy a health food business. I had no idea he's even thinking about it. But it feels simpatico with his previous career as a pharmacist.
We divest the past, purchase land, build a house, ground ourselves in Melbourne. I often joke with your folks, we won't stay here unless you give us 10 healthy years. Amazingly, your mum lives to 91.
My dad to 86. Who knew he would carve out a name for himself as a respected writer the last years of his life? We're here to witness that, thank goodness.
So inspirational for us, for our daughters who become artists in their own right. In the end, we create home on 2 continents.
2 worlds apart. Who knows how life would have taken us if we'd stayed?
We used to talk of returning to New York once the girls had grown, but forget it. We'd never consider it now. Thank God we're here, resilient and strong, because we have each other.
I don't believe in God. My father often said he was an atheist quarrelling with God. But I'm certain he was there that night I met Matthew. Josh and Ivan meet and fall in love in 1986. At the time, Ivan is 27 and in his second year of a residency in anaesthesiology, and Josh is 24, studying for a master's in sociology. After a rapturous and intense 8 months, their relationship suddenly shatters. They part for a complicated decade, keeping in touch sporadically, yet their love endures, perhaps even grows as they better understand themselves. A surprise encounter in 1996 is told with great hilarity, but it is a serious catalyst for exploring their differences and an imagined future together. Josh and Ivan marry in 2009 at the British Consulate in Melbourne, to the joy and relief of family and friends. Their generous dinner table and warm hospitality are legendary. They live and work in Melbourne. Josh is a psychologist in private practice, and Ivan a radiologist at a major metropolitan hospital. Both maintain a deep commitment to meditation and the spiritual life.
My friend Jane begs me to go to the party. I'm not keen, but there we are, stranded in a North Melbourne living room, September 1986, gawking at a handful of strangers, when suddenly Superman flies into our space, magnetised by my friend's beauty. Jane is beautiful. He flirts with us. We flirt back. I flirt back. The music grows louder and Jane wanders off, me still mesmerised. Ivan has flawless skin, boyish yet masculine. He is smart and up for sparring. We talk and talk, it gets late, and later we move into the back courtyard. I'm leaning against the brick wall, Ivan's hand just beside my head, and he leans in too, so close. I can still feel it, safe, enclosed. Something's happening here, I know. We're the last to leave, and I have met the man I will be with for the rest of my life. My friend Tom says, "Not possible, you haven't even come out properly yet." But I know what this is. I know. I don't have Ivan's number, so I track him down, tell a lie. "I'm at your hospital doing interviews for my honours thesis. It would be nice to catch up for lunch."
Oh, yes?
He says, and then...
No, I can't.
How embarrassing. I say fine. He puts me on hold. Perhaps he takes a long breath.
Oh, okay, I can see you at 1.
Then it begins. 2 weeks of whirlwind romance.
Drinks at Mietta's.
Luna Park fun.
Comedy festival.
Brideshead-style picnics on the Brighton cliff tops. Such frisson. But I'm not sure if he's straight or gay. My friends say we'll give him the treatment. If he's gay, you'll know. They set a table in the Pioneer Women's Garden. Champagne, caviar, starched linen cloth. We wear black dinner suits, but I don't tell Ivan where we're going. When I take off his blindfold, he gasps. Suddenly, we both know.
I'm at the party looking for a girlfriend. Maybe wife? I remember Jane as the most stunning girl there, but soon perceived the guy beside as more engaging. Talking with Josh is electric. He speaks while I bend myself into him. His energy is so alive and mine so forced down. I feel an explosion in my core. Later I tell my roommate, tonight I met an incredible man, handsome, funny and, yes, hetero. We have an intense time in the weeks and months ahead. I'm bursting with longing and fright, aching to honour my heart, scared of the truth. I'd grown up in a homophobic family, gone to a homophobic school, worked in homophobic places. My fear is real. It seems an annihilation of all I've ever been and dangerous to everything I've built in my life. So fear, yes, but also joy. The joy of finally being me. The irony is we're highly incompatible. Josh is extroverted, but I am not. Josh is a starter. I'm an ender. He perceives and senses, and I judge and assess. The challenge of us just being with each other is immense. For the past 24 years, that difference has been a gift, fine sandpaper to rub against. But at this point in our lives, we can't deal with our ill-matched personalities. We have no understanding, no maturity. After 8 months, the tension pulls us right apart. It's soul-rending. I love Josh. I'm confident he loves me, but there's just so much we just can't shift. Private stuff, social, historical. Our situation can only be read in context of the times. We come out just as AIDS begins to devour the gay community. Gay bars are opening their shutters. Gay pride is unshackled at last, but people are dying. Street magazines announce parties and memorialise the dead. It all feels menacing, yet exciting. Our story too. After our breakup, we go overseas, alone. Later, Josh settles in Sydney, me in Melbourne. I buy the house we'll share together one day. For 10 years, we live apart. 10 years is an eternity. We date other people. I date women. Some of them I truly love, and still do. Women I might have married, except in the deepest part of my heart, I know what it is to really love.
Imagine, I'm only in Melbourne for the weekend. Crown Casino has just opened. Neon lights flashing.
Manic music.
That crazy foyer bulging with bodies. And a woman painted gold whizzing by on roller skates. This place could not get any weirder. Suddenly, the crowd parts, as in a film. And there he is, Ivan, metres away from me. He swore he would never try Crown, but there he stands, a decade apart, and now face to face in this place. We drink vodka, play blackjack, talk. I'm bursting to tell my friends in Sydney. You'll never guess who I met alone on a Saturday evening at Crown. Ivan! How pathetic. He's back in that old house, still on his own, afraid to let go of the past. I'm so over him. Really? My Sydney friends say. But next time I'm in town, Ivan and I connect. We have dinner and, oh God, I do love him still.
I never stopped loving him.
I bore my friends stupid talking about it. During our decade of separation, he would send gifts and phone from time to time.
Happy birthday, Joshy. I'm in Amazon.
Always, I think. If I don't hear he's married, there's still a chance. Some weeks after Crown, we catch up for breakfast. We walk along Milson's Point. Rain and mist, one umbrella between us. Tense. Ivan's afraid to commit. I'm in a relationship with someone else. I can't do this, I finally say. Not 10 more years like this. It's time to decide. Either we move in together or we end it.
Days pass.
Days upon days, I wait, clinging onto a precipice until he calls.
Come home.
He says. And I do.
When Josh and I wed in 2009, we take our place in the long history of others who have loved. We come from outside to claim our right. At first we're self-conscious. That old shame rears its ugly head, but friends sweep us along with their exuberance.
You're getting married!
Legally it's not a marriage, but it is the next best thing. Josh is a British citizen. At the consulate, we find strict guidelines and are informed the British government permits us to perform these civil unions in Australia, but we're not allowed and you're not allowed to say anything other than what's prescribed. I understand I am entering into a legal binding civil partnership and declare there are no impediments to entering such. On the day our clans and kin surprise us at the consul's office, his endorsement touches us still. I want you to know, he says, the British government is glad to sanction this union. The legislation carries absolute bipartisan support. We're right behind you.
We have a magnificent party afterwards, trailing down Collins Street to Siglo Bar for champagne cocktails on the terrace.
A perfect March evening.
We dine at Momo's with a sumptuous banquet. Ivan's mum speaks. My dad tries, but can't stop crying. We make our vows, exchange rings before our intimates.
Everyone weeps.
When we reflect on our 10 years apart, we concede it was difficult but not impossible. And the gift of finally standing side by side at the end, knowing after all this time, you are still the one. That first burning light was more than our hearts could hold. Just a flash compared to our life together. They say love calls you. Ivan and I were called by love.
We answered.
Nick and Eleanor's paths initially cross at a church dance in Melbourne on March 25th, 1992. Eleanor, aged 20, is totally disinterested in Greek men. But the young blonde Nick, aged 21, doesn't look Greek at all. Yet their secretive dating and subsequent courtship, betrothal and marriage are steeped in the traditions of Greek culture. They speak quickly and with laughter as they detail the tensions they juggle, honouring their own values while trying to accommodate the expectations of the extended Greek family. They champion each other's careers, Nick with Victoria Police and Eleanor as CEO of a not-for-profit that supports women, girls and families. Over time, they've developed skilled teamwork, raising 2 sons while also satisfying the demands of an ever-fluid schedule of work and travel. Their home in Northcote is the epicentre of frequent celebrations: Easter, birthdays, weddings, baptisms. We speak at their kitchen table on a Sunday morning, accompanied by generous platters of feta cheese, tomatoes from their lush garden, and yellow peppers marinated by Nick.
We first meet on Greek Independence Day. My youth group in Brunswick and Elena's in Preston combine with other churches for a huge community dance. We're dressed in our regional costumes, mine from Crete and Elena's from Macedonia. Comes down to fate, really. So much history between us. Neither area seen as part of the real Greece. Following 400 years of Turkish occupation, when independence is finally won, Crete and Macedonia are forgotten, left out. We help each other.
We do.
It's Venizelos, the revered leader from Crete, who helped secure freedom for Macedonia in the Balkan Wars. My Baba often talks of the historic connection. Elena's grandmother has a profound affection and respect for Cretans.
My great-great-grandfather, Elias, was a freedom fighter, the last of 5 priests in our family line, teaching Greek in secret to keep language alive during Turkish rule. Macedonia doesn't gain independence until 1921.
That's right.
I'm raised in the traditional Greek way. My grandparents share our house, my auntie across the road. I'm the eldest, the only girl, so the pressure's on to attend Greek functions. I don't like Greek men.
No, you don't.
Excluding my dad, of course, a gentle, beautiful man. The boys I grew up with are completely macho. I'll never marry a Greek bloke, I swear. But there I am at the Preston Hall because our youth group is hosting the dance. I open the door, turn to my best friend and say, as if I'll meet anyone here. Then, pff, bam. There he is, Nick, collecting tickets from people. Very handsome, he doesn't look Grecian. Blonde hair and freckles. Oh my God, they've an Aussie in here in Greek costume. I can't stop looking at him. We dance, traditional oros of every kind. The spark is lit.
I'm incredibly attracted to Elena from the moment we meet, but I'm shy. I joined the same church group committees to be near her. Our first date is coffee on Lygon Street, but secretly no one can know. I bring flowers, find more excuses to see her. No social media then. Sometimes we talk for hours on the phone, me manoeuvring the stretchy cord from the kitchen to the laundry in order to speak in private.
Yeah, yelling in the background, who's on the phone?
I'm head over heels, totally besotted after only 3 months.
It's a big deal being firstborn. Meet the right man, make something of your life, huge expectations. Nick quickly decides we're perfect, but I struggle. Still determined to put career first and not marry Greek. Dad comes from grinding poverty, though his father was mayor of Parori, their village in Greece. The Germans confiscated their dwelling during the Second World War, shoved them into stables with the animals. Later their house burnt down.
Twice.
Dad migrates here with absolutely nothing. Settles in Kuirap, runs a fish and chip shop at first, then a deli. In Greece he was a tailor. Eventually he starts a men's clothing manufacture with 2 Greek backers. Extraordinary achievement. So Nick enters a high-pressure context. What will he achieve with his life?
So nerve-wracking to meet Elena's mum and dad. I'm training as an officer at the military college up in Duntroon, but drop out. Work with my father in his small cabinet-making company while thinking to join the police. Elena's worried. This guy she's introducing has no job. I won't measure up. I bring flowers and sweets. They're waiting at the door. Yes, sir, sit in the middle. Now, what will you make of yourself? I'm sweating profusely. But I swiftly connect to Yaya, the matriarch.
He charms her completely.
If you get past her, you're in. My parents are much less demanding. Baba is one of 7 siblings. He arrives in Australia in the 60s on his own. I'll be back in a few years, he says. Don't come. But he decides to stay. Organises to bring a bride from a nearby village in Crete. Through letters and photos, they arrange a marriage. Mama's only 17, but keen to get away. They're married now for 53 years. Mine's a small, close-knit family. They support whatever I want to do.
I am completely beside myself. Don't appreciate this group inquisition of Nick. Everyone full on, like way too invested. Growing up as a female in this so Greek space is difficult. I fight with my parents about university, about who I'll marry. I'm strong-willed, but I learned to work the system, cajole my brother Stavros into advocating behind the scenes. No need. Nick is so poised and elegant, he captivates them all. Oh my God, they say, such a Kyrios. They adore him ever since. One gate down, on to the next.
The families meet.
Greeks call it logos. The groom and his parents are invited to the bride's home to honour his word that they will marry. This custom pushes me too far, as if I'm a chattel to be bartered over. I'm a feminist, this is not for me. But it's tricky, as Nick's parents embrace logos as well. I fight very hard. In the end, we do not exchange rings and call it an introduction instead. Small difference perhaps, but my whole life I endure such practices, not any longer.
Some traditions we love, like kolak. The night before the wedding, a function at Elena's house for over 100 people. Traditional music, dancing, a Macedonian on the clarinet. I bring a few Cretan musicians.
Yaya's over the moon.
As my relatives arrive, we're greeted at the front door. Yaya hands out charming little towels she's crocheted especially for all the men. Beautiful aprons for the women. Theos holds a bowl of flour which he dabs on our faces, wishing us long life. Our dads break the kolak together. We'll all take a piece and we dance with the bread. It's wonderful. 2 weeks before, we have krivati at our house. The bridal bed is pressed and strewn with flowers, and everyone places the money on the bed for good fortune and prosperity.
They want the wedding at a Greek reception centre. We say no. We marry at St Kilda Town Hall, November 1996. 350 guests.
Initially, her mum wanted 500.
We try to carve out our own space, manage the tensions, but even our house is a massive issue. You're buying an old house in Northcote, come to Epping, buy new. A constant battle, what they want, what we need. Compromise. It creates a firm foundation for Nick and I to negotiate the pressures in our lives. We operate like a military exercise with everyday contingencies. Never sure what's coming next. We must be agile, communicate, deal with multiple stresses, get good jobs, pay off the house, guide the kids, keep everyone content.
Bubba often talks in parables. He says a relationship is like holding two ends of a rope. You need to give and take. If you're both pulling tight, it's a standoff. You have to let up.
Give some slack.
I know it's simplistic, but it's always in the back of my mind, that image of the rope. We live by philotomo. Some call it the Greek secret. No English word translates. It's a combination of one's virtue and moral obligation. Knowing the right thing, the wrong thing. Being compassionate and fair. It's deeply ingrained. A concept we've both grown up with. If a person is unjust to another, we say, hey, where's your philotomo? But some aspects of our culture are wrong. Like chauvinism.
Absolutely.
Men up here, women below, we're not like that. From the outset, I know Elena's a strong woman, smarter than me, more wise. All the aunts, uncles, cousins seek her advice. When a new career comes her way, I say, go for it. Awesome. Old-style men from Crete would say no. I'm super proud of her achievements. I'd never hold her back.
I see how rare he is immediately. Nothing like the Greek guys I'm running from. Nick's tender, respectful, clever. I was a corrections officer for 6 years, so I grasped the violent world of Nick's job, removing children from their parents, seeing folk on the worst day of their lives. It's traumatic for police. When Nick comes home, he absolutely needs time to debrief. Our work can be so confronting, challenging, but a gift, giving us purpose, focus. Don't sweat the small stuff, appreciate what we have, find our balance. Above all, I respect how Nick deals with the racism against him. Greeks never promoted in the ranks.
Wogs.
But he stays true to his integrity despite enormous pressure. Sergeants goad him, but because he refuses brutality in the cells, advocates change, threatens the status quo. This kind, gentle man, the type Vic Pol clearly needs, stressed out, undermined through his career.
For 20 years.
Thankfully, the force changes at last. Officers like Nick now recognised and promoted. As a supervisor, his shift work is insane. Rarely do we know the timetable 2 weeks out, yet oddly it breaks up the mundane, provides us with days to ourselves, freedom to grow personally while raising our boys, enough time to meet the obligations and demands of our loving Greek tribe.
I love what I do, but a huge culture shock in the early years. Colleagues say, "Look out, Nick, you'll become a drinker, a smoker, a womanizer."
They do, but you don't.
When night shift ends, it's off to early openers, guzzling steins of beer at 6 a.m. Are you kidding me? Serious? What's wrong with these people? I'm never going to do that. At times I want to quit, transfer to teaching, and eventually, that's what I do. Being a supervisor, I guide our new young constables.
They love him.
Induct them into good values, introduce new ideas for consideration. I carry out my job in a nurturing way. I don't mean to brag, but my approach is widely acknowledged by my peers. I'm proud. And I have more leave. Recently, we took the 2 boys to Greece for the first time. Visiting our parents' villages was profound. In Katoklinias, Elena's uncle brings us to the house where her mum was raised. It's half a shack now. At one time, 40 people crammed inside. Witnessing such hardship, it makes it painfully real for us.
In Parori, we visited Baba's old house. We're blown away. In the bedroom, occupied by the Germans, we see writing on the wall, Yaya's Kalo Pascha, Happy Easter. Determined to make her mark before her entire family is evacuated. We find her paintbrush on the floor. My God, those words still radiating after all these years. We source original entry documents for both sets of grandparents, but many records have been destroyed or lost. It's gut-wrenching. We do discover the signature of the priest who married Yaya, her grandfather. Our heritage comes alive for the boys in a way I never appreciated when I was young. But history's vulnerable. Will our grandkids speak Greek or know their culture? Yaya gifted me her grandfather's liturgy book. Inside, she's catalogued our family saga, songs from weddings and funerals. Her final words? Tell the tale of our ancestors to your brothers, your children, so they remember who we are, where we come from. Goodness.
No pressure.
Of course we will.
So good evening again. I'm Tali, Lavi, one of Melbourne Jewish Book Week's programmers and a critic and writer. Barbara Kamler is a Melbourne poet and emeritus professor of education at Deakin University. She is the author of 5 academic works, including Relocating the Personal, a critical writing pedagogy, the editor of 4 more academic works and writer of over 60 journal articles and book chapters on literacy, writing pedagogy and identity. In 2016, her debut poetry collection, Leaving New Jersey, was published, about which poet Anthony Lawrence professed, these lyrical, deeply moving poems work like sepia tone postcards, where family scenes are honed back to overheard talk, glimpsed expressions, streets and living rooms. Since then, her poetry has appeared in publications including Australian Poetry Journal, The Age, The Australian and Poetrix, which, with one of her poems, The Usual Questions Do Not Pertain, what a title, shortlisted for the 2017 Newcastle Poetry Prize. In 2019 emerged Two Tales of Long Love, a chapbook precursor to this, the main event, Love Regardless. Poet Kevin Brophy has proclaimed it to be stories of 14 long love couples which come alive as voices, as poetry, and as quivering dialogue in the hands of the superb Barbara Kamler. I could not have said it better, for present in this rapturous volume are her gifts of musicality and listening, not the casual listening that we engage with in the everyday, but listening that is more akin to the kind Russian poet Marina Tsavet, and I forgot to practice this, sorry. Yes, Maria Tsateva once wrote, I don't eavesdrop, I listen attentively, just like the doctor does, the chest. I am thus thrilled to welcome my friend, the superb Barbara Kamler. Wasn't that just a joy? Barbara, how does that feel for you?
It's just amazing, I have to say. The actors were so attuned to the language and the music that Simon created. Simon Starr was just magical. And you have to know that we didn't rehearse until today. So the actors had the scripts, and we didn't gather until today at 10 a.m. under the direction of Romi Kupfer. Romi and I have been talking about this for a long time, and before that, Tali and I imagined this event pre-COVID, and when it was cancelled, and here we are. So it's the one thing I'd like to say about that is that the book began as a set of interviews in conversation with couples, to whom I'm extremely grateful, or we wouldn't be here tonight. And then I worked for a number of years, and I'll probably talk about that later, to kind of shape that language, those interviews, and the transcripts of what they said to verse, to get the music and the rhythm of their speaking. But if any of you have ever looked at the transcript of speech, it's very messy, it's repetitive, it has lots of fillers and gaps. So to kind of reduce that and craft that, and then to have these marvelous actors take those words and speak them as dialogue. So from dialogue to poem to dialogue to drama. It's thrilling. And to hear it come alive on the stage, I think was amazing. I'm very grateful.
You spoke of it as a circle before, after the rehearsal, and it feels very close, as you said, to its first iterations of conversations which you were witness to. But now it's really interesting because now we're witness to it. And so it works really beautifully that way, the way it shifts but also comes back to the beginning.
I think I should talk to you a little bit about the process of it becoming what it is. There's a type of verse which is called syllabic verse, for those of you who don't know it, and that means that it's a discipline. It's a little odd. You decide how many syllables will be in a line, and you count syllables for each word and for each of the words in the line. So for each poem, I decided on how many syllables, and they range mostly 12, 14, 15, or 16. One of them had 7 syllables. And so as I moved from the conversation, the transcript to this verse, I would count syllables. So, for example, you have to make decisions about how many syllables there are in a word. So it's not always straightforward. Is chocolate chocolate or chocolate? Is Australia Australia or Australia? And once you decide, then you have to be consistent and stay with it. So what happens is that when you start, you just, like in some of the poems you'll see, say there are 4 lines per stanza of 12 syllables. So if I say, and I sit at the desk counting on the desk, when, I have an example from here. But he panics when I return to Australia. But he panics when I return to Australia. So I've got 13. So what am I going to do? Am I going to get Australia onto the next line and fill additional words onto that line? Am I going to... What am I going to do? So every time you come to an end of a line and the syllables aren't working, you have to be inventive and decide what to do. And if, say, you have 4 lines in a stanza and you come to the end of the poem and there's only 2 lines, what do you do? So sometimes I would go back to the transcript and say, well, what can I add? Or then what can I take away? And then every time I took away that line, then I had to do the line before and the line before. So it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but it's also a container. It's a discipline. So it helps move from speech to poetry, to capture the rhythm and the way of speaking and the musicality, but not just be the mundane, some of the ways in which we speak. So it took 3.5 years.
It speaks of both masochism and playfulness.
Right.
Barbara, I think, this idea of listening and capturing human speech and yet perfecting it into or elevating it to an art form. You began as a sociolinguist. Can you tell us a bit about what this entails?
So over a 35, I guess, year academic career, I was a sociolinguist, which means I was very interested in language, but always language in its social context. Like how does the context in which you live shape the language in which you use, and how does the language you use reshape the context in which you live? So most of my career in my research, I did interview-based research. So with Terry Threadgold, who some of you know and love, we did a project on women and aging, where we were focused on, and this was in the early 90s before people were really talking about active aging, or they were talking about super aging, but not what women particularly were really doing. So we were after, what are the stories that they could tell? So we interviewed them, we worked with them in writing workshops and video workshops. So I've always been interested in, as a researcher, getting to the stories that don't always get told. I was quite obsessed in my early career with 5-year-old children going to school and, what it was like to be them and to be disciplined into becoming a schoolgirl or a schoolboy. So, I spent a month in classrooms sitting on little chairs. You can't really interview little kids, but you talk to them and you listen to them. So I think, my whole research career has been about interviewing, listening, and focusing on language. How do people use language? And early on, how does the language that you use also create your perspective, your gender, your view on the world? And then also how, perhaps by changing some of the stories that we tell, can we make a difference to the way in which we live? So in a way, this collection brings together that past with my more present interest in poetry. And I left Deakin University as a full-time professor in 2008, I think, partly because I wanted to turn to poetry. So this book kind of brings them back together again in a way, you know, interview-based, and then how do I take an interview and turn it into verse? So a bit crazy, but it was quite a lot of fun, I have to say. Although obsessive and agonizing at times.
I think that Love Regardless stirs up the idea of the one. For some it might be anxiety-provoking, for others a fantasy. Miriam says in that first dialogue, she says, the rabbi said that their union was bashert. On Saturday night, during our opening night of Melbourne Jewish Book Week, poet, writer of fiction and critic Brian Wolpert spoke about the word bashert, which is often employed as an idea of romantic predestination. He said this: the origin of the word is itself a matter of some mystery. Such things are appealing to a poet. Some say it comes from the German for bestowed or given, but I prefer the argument that it comes from the Yiddish word sher, to cut or clip. As Moment magazine puts it, the idea being that bashert is something that has been shaped in a specific way. Now, I love this because I think it echoes the ideas embedded within your book of both the shaping of the narrative and the shaping that is the work that is long-term love. We'll return to the former later, although we've spoken a little bit about the syllabic verse. But let's talk about the work of love as encountered in these conversations.
All the time I was writing this, people would say, so, what's the secret? And I could never answer because there is no one secret. But I think there's a few things in common, I guess, in shaping these relationships which lasted. And people talk a lot about having a shared set of values, that underneath everyday trials or major life challenges, that there was a set of common values and beliefs that they could always return to, or that kept things steady as a beating heart underneath. A lot of laughter. I have to say that in the interviews, people laughed a lot, and laughed in the remembering, having appreciated all that they had survived in between. And often when you're in the middle of it, it's extremely difficult to see where you're going and where you've been. So I think moments like the interview allowed people to appreciate the journey that they'd been together, and the way they took turns and filled in gaps when they couldn't remember, was really lovely. So it was a kind of, in the speaking together, I kind of picked up on some of the ways in which they live their life together. But always, you know, there was a lot of listening to each other, and I think tonight was all about listening, the way the actors picked that up and listened to each other. And then Simon's amazing music, about how he listened to those relationships and created a sound that was part of the conversation. So there's a lot of work, and I think, you know, my desire with this collection is to say there's a lot written about the beginnings of love and passionate love and early love, and a lot written about the dissolution, divorce, disaster. And then there's this middle space about people who stay together. And, you know, are their stories boring or tedious or mundane? Well, absolutely not. And I guess telling these stories, which I guess is consistent with what I've done in my career, is like, what are the stories that are less told, and to give those people who have lasted together an opportunity to talk about that and for us to hear it. I don't know if I've answered the question.
You did. And there's that beautiful image, and I'm just looking for it now, in that last story, Nick and Eleanor's story of the rope. I'm just going to read out the Baba often talks in parables. He says a relationship is like holding two ends of a rope. You need to give and take. If you're both pulling tight, it's a standoff. You have to let up, give some slack. I just love that. You know, it spoke of so much. And I think almost that this should be given as a book when people get married. It's like, forget about marriage counselling or whatever, just give them Barbara's book, because it shows the ways, because they're all different ways.
And I think, you know, sometimes a young friend of mine said that, you know, at a time when she and her partner were going through a difficult time, they had a lot of advice about exiting, you know, taking the exit ramp. How do you, when it seems too difficult, how do you get out? And she didn't want to do that. She wanted stories of how people managed it. And I think that's partly what I hope to get at. And there's a line in the poem from people I call Rosie and Saul. And I just think this is a really beautiful kind of way of getting at that kind of commitment that I think underlies a lot of these relationships. The glue that binds is not about being soulmates. It's making a choice to commit absolutely, no matter how we provoke or aggravate. For 52 years, we've resided together, fought together, forgiven together. I love you more than I was capable of as a young man. You hold my heart carefully. How could I ever find such grace with anyone else?
I defy any of you not to cry at that. I knew it was going to happen. It was only a matter of time. Let's talk a little bit about the shaping of the work, because actually, if you look at the design of the book, it's not just lines flowing across a page. Can you speak to us a bit about that?
Well, I really did try in each poem to get to the rhythm of the speaking of the partners. So you'll see that some of the poems are formatted vertically down the page, one turn after another, kind of mini monologues. And when I look in retrospect, that's partly the way people spoke, but it's also partly the way I heard some of them speak, you know. And then there are some poems where I have the turns go across the page because it seemed that people were adding on to each other's sentences more or finishing each other's sentences. But I actually think that maybe more of that was going on and that I got better at hearing that over time. And the other thing that happened over time, which I think also influenced, you know, the way it's set out on the page, is that I was a bit obsessed. You know, this is a 3.5-year project. I was a bit early obsessed with how people met. I thought it was just great, you know, because I just met Greg, and wasn't that great? And amazing. I still think it's amazing how people come together and stick together. So a lot of my early questions focus on the excitement of that, and over time, as I did more and more interviews, they got longer, and people just started talking more about sustaining, you know, how they got through difficult times or managed. And so in the process of then looking at the collection over time, I found that a lot of the early poems needed more. So the researcher and me went back and said, we need to talk again. So we did it on Skype and mostly on the phone or FaceTime for additional information, so that, I kind of got a fuller picture of the relationship. I could read later that some of them were less substantial than the others. So I went to get more information. But each poem looks different. I don't know how, but I just decided on, some of the couples should have shorter lines than longer. And it was just something about the way they spoke. And it was a bit of a challenge in setting it out, because if I had known that 16 syllables would go to the end of the page and drive the publisher crazy, I think I would have stayed much shorter. So that actually in the laying out of the thing, I still had to do revisions to kind of manage the lines and shorten some of them and find words that fit the line. So as I said, you can have Australia, that gets you rid of 4 syllables and it's only one word. So your line's going to be shorter. So the syllabics also change the way in which it's shaped on the page.
One of the things I really enjoy about the experience of reading is not just, I take away the word just, because that's not what it is. It's not merely the experience of the two people that's on the page, but it is located in a time and a place. All those historical details that means so much, that evokes so much, the history that kind of is the haunting sometimes to their stories. Can you tell us a bit about that process of locating the stories, whether that was one of the things that you were going back to people in terms of the interviews?
Surprisingly, they offered a lot of that. Because it was like, you can't understand us unless you understand where we were then. This was 1970, this was 1980. The couple who's been together the longest met at high school, and they said, well, we were young. I mean, we weren't developed. And, I had to learn over a long period of time how to become an independent person. Or Josh and Ivan, who we heard about tonight, were very clear that they were shaped by the times, as were Elena and Nick, I think. What was his name? These are the pseudonyms. They all have pseudonyms, so I can't remember if I'm using their real name or their. But I had to do a little bit more research on the times, but for the most part, people were quite clear about that influencing the couple who, one partner is German, one is Australian, and there was a whole set of migration issues and dealing with the department in that time. And so I think the history is part of the storytelling for the most part. And, I probably I always had to go back to get more detail or clarity, because it was part of my researcher hat, but also the initial telling was exciting, but not always clear. And I got, it was a bit of confusion about time and place and date, and I had to go back several times just to get more and fill them out.
Did they argue?
During the...
as in the time and the place and the day.
Oh, yeah. When was that? No one could remember. So, not too much. Not in front of me.
A question probably everyone wants to know is, the answer to is, how did the selection process happen?
So I started with a few close friends who were willing to talk. And then it was this classic thing we call snowballing. They suggested other people, and then someone suggested another person, and then they got further and further away from me in terms of my immediate circle, because I was really looking for as much diversity as I could get, and I think I probably got a lot, but not as much as I hoped for. I made a lot of approaches to people who just didn't want to do it. I mean, they liked the idea, but they didn't want to make their private public, even though there were pseudonyms. But pseudonyms are, so no one's name is used, the couples. I've changed all their names, but of course the people in their immediate world will recognize them for who they are. But it still says these are stories. They're not the truth. They're not their truth. They're my version of their telling. And so, I tried to get as diverse a group as I could. And I don't think I fully succeeded in that, but I did as well as I could. I just kept asking people wherever I went, do you know anybody who's been married 20 years or more and you think might like to talk about their relationship and how they sustain it?
When we were talking about this, you told me that the late poet Geordie Elbiston told you, don't get stuck in exactly what they said. Do you want to speak a bit about Geordie and what she meant by that?
I would. So, Geordie Elbiston, for those of you who don't know her, was really one of Australia's finest poets who tragically died about 3 months ago. And she's been a critical part of my growing from being an academic to being a poet. I did a course with her at the Writers Victoria for the first time, I think in 2010. And I did a number of workshops with her. And then as I moved into writing collections, she was always, a very close reader, an editor, and a responder to the drafts. So her pencil marks were all over my drafts. Then we would meet, usually at her dining table, and go through them together. And she was she didn't like the idea so much at first. She thought it was a bit weird to go from an interview to poetry. She didn't like writing about people who were alive. She told me it got you in trouble, which it did with my first book. That was about my family. But as she urged me not to listen to the rhythms, but not to be trapped by what people said, not to follow it so closely, because spoken language is not always lively. It doesn't sing. It doesn't jump off the page. So, like playwrights, you write a version of it so that it seems real, but is poetic. And one thing she used to say is, never use contractions to get out of syllable hell. So, because you can do it, you can reduce it, you can get the number of syllables right, but it won't read right. So when it works well, it sings. And she was beside me, urging me to do this. And it's a bit sad to me that she lived to know that it was being published, but she wasn't able to see this or to be here tonight. So I'd like to pay a deep tribute to her in my development, and to say it's a great gift to have great teachers.
I want to say that after this question, I'll open it up to if there are any questions from the audience. We'll even take rapturous comments. As long as you're a poet, you can speak. This very event was meant to occur in 2020. Truth be told, we were all an epoch younger then. And I don't bring this up merely to re-traumatise you or Romi or the Melbourne Jewish Book Week people who lost a festival. This event is the singular survivor and how it blazes. For there is something about the emergence of this story now, over 2 years into a global pandemic, that has us craving these luminous stories of reprieve, this celebration of love in all its various iterations. Does it feel different to you?
It feels hopeful. I think it feels more hopeful than it did when I was initially writing it. It's been a really tough time, being separated from each other and sometimes being together too much. And the strains, have been evident to everyone in different ways. But I think that it's a great joy that it survived and that the couples survive and that it's possible to build long and rich and loving relationships. And regardless of all the things that will happen, and there are always challenges and difficulties. And I specifically was speaking to love actually, and to say, no, love regardless.
Thank God for that. Are there any questions or... I think it's a good note to end on. The words of Elena's... Oh, sorry, was there a question? Yeah. Yes, of course. We'll just get a roving mic to you. We'll get a roving mic to you so we can hear you. And no questions of why didn't you choose me, Barbara?
Yes, I was wondering, Barbara, whether you had any sort of contract with the couples that you interviewed, in the sense of, did you have the freedom to put it any way you wished, or did you seek feedback from the couples before you published it in terms of what was acceptable to them?
That's an important question. With my researcher history, I always need to check with the people whose words I use. So they agreed kindly, and then at the end, I sent them the to be published version, asking them for their comment, and if they wanted anything changed or added. Several people made changes. Sometimes it was cutting out something they had said, which was intimate, and they just felt they didn't want it. Sometimes, this is quite funny. One of the couples had been married and had a very small wedding, and then they had a larger wedding and asked me to read this poem, their poem, at the wedding. And the bride said, look, that section when I talked about the past boyfriend, well, can you cut it out because he's going to be there? I said, sure. And then, I looked at it and I thought, well, if she didn't want it to be there, then it shouldn't be there. Others, made suggestions that really, helped me improve some of the line breaks and the rhythm. Most people just tinkered a little bit with it, but for the most part, everybody was pretty happy. They kind of enjoyed seeing their life compressed in quite a intense and a short way. But I absolutely didn't publish any of them without their approval. So.
Any other question? No, that's fine. The words of Elena's "Ya resound. Tell the tale of our ancestors to your brothers, your children, so they remember who we are. Barbara, you have told the stories not of our ancestors, but of these couples, and they remind us of our humanity. They remind us of who we are, of who we might be. Thank you for sharing with us this gift of poetry that is grounded in our everyday.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for coming.
Brav, just a couple of acknowledgements. Thank you. I won't be long. Brava to Romi Kupfer, who is a director of prodigious talent. Keep a lookout for her future productions. Thank you to our fabulous performers, Yoni Pryor, Ellie Erez, and Jack Migdalek. They had only today, as Barbara already said, to rehearse. To Simon Starr for his masterful atmospheric improvisations. Thank you to Leo for audio tech, to Chris and Sebastian, our videographers, and to Kelly, our photographer. Thank you to Avenue Bookstore for selling books. We love you, independent bookstores, and particularly Avenue. No, I didn't say that. Barbara will be signing copies of Love Regardless. Buy it for everyone you love. Read it, I'm sure you will. And thank you for coming to Melbourne Jewish Book Week, a lovely audience. Thank you.